we are going to go through a scenario about what happens when somebody in crisis communicates. So, ladies and gentlemen, imagine, if you will, a 19-year-old guy called John, and John's story goes back about a year, and to the summer, and he was doing his leaving cert. He lives with his mum and his sister because his dad left when he was quite young, and obviously, apart from the stress of the leaving cert, it was an eventful end to the school year, as one of the lads in his group, didn't know him terribly well, but he took his own life. And that really affected everyone, naturally enough, and the whole school was in shock. And that summer, John wasn't working. He had a lot of time on his hands. He had never had any obvious mental health problems or any difficulties at all. But last summer, as might happen, he wasn't feeling great and he felt a bit lost. So what was summer like?
I suppose I found summer tough and long. I found myself, I suppose, a bit disinterested in a lot of the things that I normally would have found enjoyment out of. I found it hard just getting up out of bed in the morning, talking to kind of friends and family. I found myself kind of a bit more isolated. Didn't really know where to turn to be honest, to talk through what I was going through.
And what did you do?
I suppose I kind of hit a bit of a low point at one stage. There was kind of periods when I felt very, very down, and there was times when I did feel like ending my own life. And I didn't know kind of who to talk to about it, so I did kind of turn to something that, I use the internet quite a lot, so I did end up kind of Googling it, to be honest.
Hit the Google machine.
Yeah, the verb that isn't a verb, kind of just Googled it, I suppose, just to kind of get some more information, and just kind of find out where I could turn to, what kind of...
Can you remember what you typed in?
Yes, I literally just typed in kind of ending it all. Being honest about it, I didn't know how to phrase it. It was something I'd never really done before. And from typing that in, a list of kind of supports and advice and kind of information came up, and I did end up recognizing one of the services. Reachout.com popped up, and that was a name I'd seen before on posters that were up around my school.
And what did you find when you went on to reach out?
A lot of different information. I suppose straight away I was brought to a fact sheet on kind of wanting to end your own life. So I did read through that, and then I ended up clicking through other kind of parts of the site, got more information on different kind of fact sheets and stuff. And I did kind of find a lot of information from kind of young people and stuff on it as well. So there's a lot of kind of blogs and personal stories written by young people, which I suppose I found quite inspiring or quite heartening, kind of knowing that other people had been through something similar to what I was going through at the moment as well.
Debbie, you're his mum. Did you notice anything about John? Any changes, anything like that?
John and I always had a great relationship. He was very, very chatty with his sister, but I noticed over the summer he wasn't working. He was very withdrawn. I kept asking him all the time, are you okay? But the fact that he's 19, I didn't be on his case all the time. He was constantly on the internet in his bedroom. If he wasn't on the internet in his bedroom, he was on the internet in his phone.
Would you not have just seen that as being normal?
Well, you see, it was summertime. I thought he would have been out with his friends. No one was knocking at the door, and he was very quiet. His appetite was a bit low. He just seemed disconnected and didn't want to talk to me. And I actually thought about going on Facebook myself and asking him to be my friend, because there was no connection between the two of them. So I guess I was worried.
And what did you do?
Well, I didn't know what to do. I'm not that old, but I didn't know much about the internet in regard to mental health websites. I felt I was on his case all the time, so I just let him be.
So, John, you reached out. So, what happened when you reached out?
So, one thing that I spotted on the website, and in particular the fact sheet that I was brought to, was that young people were leaving comments at the end of the fact sheet as well, kind of comments about what they were going through themselves. So that was something that I did after kind of looking through the website. I kind of felt the urge to kind of click in and write a comment. Something that I hadn't really done before. I didn't know, I suppose initially I didn't know where to turn to, and I wasn't comfortable enough to talk to. I had to talk to my mom or to talk to anyone else. So I ended up writing out a comment, and I suppose when I kind of started opening up kind of what I was feeling, a lot of stuff kind of came out, and I left a pretty involved comment on the website in the end.
I was just going to ask you a strange question maybe, but did you know what you would comment, or what comment you would make?
Not really. I didn't really know what I was going through. There have obviously been circumstances throughout my life that have had a deep effect on me, but at the time I just didn't know why I felt so withdrawn and why I didn't have any energy. And just when I started kind of opening up, I suppose a lot of that kind of stuff kind of did come out in the end.
And did you get a response?
Yeah, I did. I got an automatic response straight away saying that my comment would be reviewed and that I get a response within 24 hours.
Now, that's an area that I've taken a big interest in, is that lag, the 24-hour lag. Were you disappointed by that?
Not particularly. Again, like I'd mentioned, that I wasn't really, it's something I'd never done before, I'd never really spoken and opened up about it before. So I don't think I was really looking to engage in a back and forth conversation straight away. It was enough of a task for me to kind of open up and actually explain what I'd been going through. The fact that I got a response at all, saying that I would get a response further down the line, was comforting enough.
That was enough, just
It was,
the,
and like,
the beginning of an unburdening.
Yeah, exactly. And there was further options if I needed immediate assistance, like the Samaritans and stuff as well. So even just in the back of my head, having that option, I suppose, there for even if I wanted it was very helpful.
So Roisin, you are a real-life reach-out moderator, and this is based on a real-life situation. When you picked up the comment, what did you do?
So I was on the weekend moderating rota, so I picked up the comment on the Saturday morning. So just generally saw the comment, read through it, because John had mentioned in his comment that he was feeling suicidal. I did ring Director of Programs and had a chat with him about the comment, and we decided that we just reply to it as normal, put it live on the site.
Now, what does as normal mean?
So there's a couple of different ways that we can reply to comments. If we think that someone is in danger of hurting themselves or someone else, then we would escalate that. Or if we thought that someone's comment would be triggering for other community members to read, we would reply to them by email rather than publishing on the site.
So the triggering bit I get, because it's obviously somebody's saying that they're going to do something pretty drastic. Where's the fine line between escalation and maybe an email, or maybe just a general response?
So a general response is we would give to something like John's comment, where we feel that reading the comment won't do any harm to the community, and it can be really helpful for other young people, as John kind of mentioned, to read through other people's comments and see what they were going through and what kind of replies they got. Someone who we would just email would be someone who kind of used graphic descriptions of self-harm or eating disorders or something like that that could be quite harmful for someone going through a tough time to read, but we wouldn't think that they were in immediate danger of hurting themselves or anyone else, so we would reply to them by email.
So you're looking for kind of key words or key messages?
Yeah.
So what happens when you escalate?
So if I read a comment and I thought that someone was immediate...
I'm sorry, I'm failing to hear you.
If I read a comment and I thought that someone was in immediate danger of hurting themselves or someone else, which would be, mentioning that they were feeling very suicidal or previous attempts of self-harm, or there's a number of different kind of clues that you can get, I would ring the Director of Programs, and together we would contact one of our clinical advisors. So we have a panel of psychiatrists and mental health professionals that would have a look at the comment and advise us whether to escalate it further, and if they thought that it was a serious risk, we would contact the police.
So two questions. How quickly can that escalation happen? And secondly, you've only got a comment. How can you find John in this situation?
It can happen quite quickly. We do get a lot of comments when we can answer them straight away. Once we see the comment, it's maybe an hour before we would contact the police, depending on if people have their phones handy and that kind of stuff. We do have weekend moderating rotas, and we always have people on call, so that process can happen really quickly.
And my second question was about, like, all you have is something that may be signed John, probably isn't signed anything, just I'm not feeling too good, or I'm going to do something to myself. So how do you know who this is, or how do you get to that person?
Well, we generally have an email address for them. Sometimes people would give us their names or their full names. We'd also have an IP address that we can track kind of what area they're in. And a lot of the times as well, people give us other information about themselves in the comments. So if they're known, especially if it's a small town or something like that, if they're known to mental health services or police, other information in the comment that could help them identify that person.
So if you have, say, an IP address, what can the Gardaí do? Because I presume you go to the Gardaí as well, do you?
What can they do?
How can they trace, how can they help find John?
They look up the IP address and try and locate where the person is. Obviously, there's a lot of problems with that. You can change your IP address to say you're somewhere else, or sometimes they can give you quite a wide area.
So Owen, if I can pick up on that from you, your turn to me. You're different in some ways to reach out, but you run a similar service. And in this case, John came to you, or John was sent on to you. Why?
Why was he sent on?
Correct.
Okay, well, basically, Turn to Me, just to say a little bit about what we
Please.
do. There is a complementarity between Turn to Me on the one hand and Reach Out on the other. One of the basic differences would be that we offer our services only to people who are 18 years of age or over, and that has implications regarding the kind of content that can be contained on the site, and also some of the policies and procedures that we would have, limits to confidentiality, things like that. Another difference, I suppose, is that we really focus on direct service provision and intervention. So when you come to our site, what you'll see is that rather than the really substantial and very good quality information that Reach Out has on youth mental health, we actually focus on things like online support forums, which are moderated and kept safe in that way. We have online support groups as well. We have one-to-one online counselling. A mood tracking tool called Thought Catcher, which can be used to graph people's moods, thinking and behaviours over time. And we've recently launched what we call the Engage program, which is a kind of intensive combination of all of these services over an 8-week period, which we hope to get assessed in due course as well.
And when it comes to escalation, I think you do it differently, do you?
Actually, the way in which we handle that is quite similar to Reach Out. The IP address really is the key feature that we would usually have. Reach Out have worked with us in having a meeting already, and we have another meeting planned quite soon with An Garda Síochána. So we're hoping to develop those links and streamline and refine that process so that people who are possibly at risk and in crisis can be reached a lot faster. We have been advised that when we have the IP address and when there is cause to implement our own escalation protocol, as Reach Out have as well, that is at that point better handed over to the Gardaí. They're in a better position to handle it from there, and there are some slight differences in terms of the circumstances in which we would escalate.
But it's working better, but it still sounds complicated to me.
Well, it is complicated, and it's a work in progress in a sense, and that's why we're holding these meetings with An Garda Síochána. Turn to Me also offers its services to a lot of people in the UK, and so that can lengthen the process even further, but that's something that the emergency services through the Gardaí are best positioned to handle. I suppose it turned to me as well if people are involved in one of our professional services, so if they're receiving one-to-one online counselling or if they're part of this Engage programme that we've recently launched, we will have more detailed information regarding them, which will be required for them to even be included in that service. And in those cases, we have things like the person's real name, telephone number, postal address, all of the details regarding their GP or healthcare provider, and so we're in a better position then to directly contact either a specific Irish police station or a UK police station or wherever the person is based. So it kind of depends on what level of the service they're using. It is a work in progress, and we hope to refine it further through these meetings with the guards.
Now, we heard last night and again this morning about the Australian experience. Kerry Bougier, when you've heard the scenario here, would it be similar? Would it be treated in a similar fashion in Australia?
Yeah, actually the process that we use in Reach Out in Australia is very similar to what I've heard described here. If somebody posts on our site or on our forums an immediate risk and an imminent danger to either themselves or others, then we have arrangements with emergency services that we would contact immediately with relevant information like an IP address and anything contained in the post that might help to locate the person. If there is a post which refers to, say, suicidal ideation without an immediate plan, we would tend to contact that person by private messaging, see if we can ascertain some more information about what they're going through, and then signpost them through to services which will be relevant to them, crisis services or other services which may be of benefit. It's also really important to note that we have really clear internal escalation policies as well. quite often when there's posts on our forums and site, it is very black and white and it's clear about what to do, but there's also a lot of grey area which really does need some discussion. As you pointed out before, it's not always clear cut about when to escalate and who to escalate to. So we have very clear internal escalation procedures to our executive team and to our clinical advisory group, where we can have conversations about what is the most appropriate way to sort of handle that escalation process and who we need to be contacting and bringing into the situation.
And again, do you move at the same speed or faster?
We indicate on our site that we would respond within 24 hours. The same. We often would respond a lot more quickly than that. We do moderate extended hours, so we moderate during business hours through to 10 o'clock at night, but we don't moderate overnight. For that reason, it's really important that it's very clear to the community that it's not a 24/7 service and there's not going to be an immediate response necessarily, and to have very clear information about what services are available that they can contact 24/7 if they do need that level of support.
Roisin, if I can come back to you, how do you respond to comments like John's?
Is this work? Yes. So in terms of John, we decided that we didn't think he was at immediate risk of ending his own life. He did mention that he had had thoughts of suicide, but he sounded more like he was just kind of venting and looking to connect and a bit confused and looking for information and to kind of understand what he was going through. So in terms of John's comment, we really just replied, kind of trying to reflect back what he was saying to us, acknowledging that he was going through a tough time and kind of suggest some formal and informal support. So advice about looking after your own mental health and opening up to people, but also we recommended some services. In this case, I recommended Turn to Me because I thought John was already comfortable talking in an online setting and that he might not be ready to speak to someone face to face because he hadn't spoke to his mum about it. So I thought that talking to other people his own age who were going through something similar in an online setting might have been a good first step for him.
Okay, this is again something we're going to turn to because it was mentioned last night, and I think Bláthnaid is a clinical psychiatrist, a practicing psychiatrist. Where do you see the role of the online assistance relative to where you are one-on-one, hands-on?
Thanks for the question. I see it basically as hugely important to the work of the sort of basic day-to-day services that are in existence in Ireland. So just to put a bit of context, I work in a community child and adolescent mental health service, and we get about 350 referrals a year to my team, and then about 2,000 to the service as a whole. And in terms of the role of the online information, the very first and most basic thing I think is that a huge proportion of young people and parents that come to us tell us that they absolutely struggle with knowing what to do when the problem first becomes apparent to them. That in Ireland it would seem that there's still a huge level of challenge in people understanding mental health and when difficulties arise. And as parents have often very simply put to me, if their child, is wheezing or is seeming to have some sort of basic difficulty, if they've acne or whatever, they know what to do. It's very simple, take them down to the GP. When a young person seems to be struggling, isn't going out, is isolated, they really struggle to know what to do. And the critical thing for this is, from our point of view, is there's such a critical period there that if the symptoms continue with no one knowing what to do, problems mount in school and home, stress levels build up. And so many parents have said, if only there was clear information on the internet detailing for us what are the services that are there, who should we turn to, especially in that group of children and young people that have gone beyond the point of sort of minor mental health difficulties into the more severe range. And it's very, very encouraging the work that Inspire are doing currently with bodies like the College of Psychiatry of Ireland to try and put that to the top of the agenda. Something as simple as having an online registry of all the services that are there. We've done loads and loads of focus groups with GPs, primary care physicians, they've said that the single most important thing for them or helpful thing when a young person comes in is to be able to say, in my area, these are the services, this is where you need to go. So that signposting is crucial. Another aspect, I think, is developing and promoting, as Alicia was saying, the understanding around what are the difficulties. And your question there, is this just normal for a teenager? So many parents will say to us, we thought for months they were just going through the typical teenage difficulties. And interestingly to me, in a ratio of about 10 to 1, the children and young people that are referred in to me are children that, if you just put it bluntly, and are causing problem for other people. So the teenagers that come in and are kicking off at school, are nearly being expelled, whatever it is that they're up to. The child, the young person that's sitting quietly in the corner, anxious, depressed, they're not seen, they're not picked up as having the difficulties. So getting that information out, getting those life stories is absolutely crucial. Another aspect, picking up on what Dara was saying there earlier, I don't think anyone could disagree with what he would say. Getting that positive success story out there, particularly in relation to those at the severe end of the mental health difficulty spectrum, because so often, unfortunately still, if you Google issues around therapeutic input, there's an awful lot more negative stories than positive ones. They don't map onto what our data would say in terms of outcomes. As people will know, there is huge progress in terms of the treatments of young people. Loads and loads of success, and for a young person, if they just Google and see the negatives, they're never going to want to access. So we've got to get those stories out there, that positivity, that sense, yes, we achieve, and day to day in all the services in the country, there's good work happening. And getting that alignment between those of us that are doing the day-to-day work with the young people all the time, and then all the exciting stuff that's happening outside of it is a real goal to strive for. I think then for those young people that come in to see us all the time, they're asking about the online services that are available. Could they access stuff? So everyone's familiar with the data in Ireland that our peak referral rate is around the junior cert age up into leaving cert. And young people say to us, look, I don't have the time to come into, one day a week for an hour, whatever it is, I'm trying to juggle, I'm stressed already. What could I do online for this? So getting more cognitive behavioural therapy programs, as people are saying, standardised programs that we could link with directly and oversee, just as was described earlier in the Australian, is absolutely key to what we're doing. And I think that finally, just to say that piece around all the other pieces, like Alicia was saying there, with teachers, with all of the other groups, constantly we're getting queries as more and more knowledge is out there. What are your systems? How do they operate? And I know you were all referencing their confidentiality. There's such basic concepts out there that frighten kids, like a lot of the Australian data would show. One of the biggest negatives for young teenagers coming to access services like ours is concepts like confidentiality. What will be told to my parents? And all of those things are so remediable with simple answers out there for that explain, that put that out there and demystify and put the human face on what we do. Because most people that come in and meet us find that there's a positive experience, but still what's out there isn't matching that. So across the care pathway, as I'd like to see it, there's roles at every line, at every point, from the simple signposting, directing, destigmatization, right up to integrating with the work we do, complementing it and making it user-friendly and adapting to the world the young people live in. So I just would like to commend what you've done, and we, I suppose, as psychiatrists, as mainstream day-to-day workers, really want to be part of that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Bláthnaid. John, if I can turn back to you, you got a response from Roisin. Were you happy enough with how she responded, or what the response was?
I suppose it was kind of a strange feeling actually getting a response. I'd never kind of opened up like that before, so actually getting such a personal response as well from someone that I didn't really know was a little bit of a strange feeling. I was a little bit embarrassed, being honest about it as well.
Embarrassing?
Just from the point of view that it was a stranger getting back to me with such a personal reply. Like, I wasn't comfortable enough opening up to, like I said, my mother or someone else that I knew. So that was one little aspect. Overall, the advice I got, yes, I was quite happy with it.
And what was the advice, and what was your reaction to that?
I suppose one of the things that really stood out for me was something that was said was that I deserved to feel better. I'd never really thought of it in that kind of frame of mind before, so that was something that really kind of stuck with me. Roisin, like she mentioned, I was pointed to other kind of formal supports like Turn to Me, like the online support groups there, which I took part in. And something else as well was suggested was that I actually, did try and open up to my mother and actually talk to her about what I was going through as well. Which I didn't do straight away, but after a few days, I did feel comfortable. I did kind of find an opportunity, and we did chat about what I was going through. I didn't feel better straight away. It didn't cure everything, but it was a bit of a weight off to actually open up and actually chat about what I was going through.
So Debbie, John opened up to you. How did that make you feel?
I was very shocked initially. As a mum, I was thinking, what have I done? Why wasn't I there to help him? But the overall sense of relief was tremendous. Then as a mum, I was thinking, okay, we need to go to a doctor, we need to go to a psychiatrist, we need to go to something. And then I was very pleased that John had actually done so much work himself online, that he'd actually gone to Turn to Me, that he'd decided that this was the course of action that he wanted to take, that he trusted the service he was getting, and I was just really happy to go along with him on the journey.
And did you dive in yourself online?
I was straight on, yeah. Straight in there. We, as a parent, like, you don't really think about those things until you're confronted with them, and then you think you're being paranoid. But no, we're fully up to speed now, and we're in a good place.
So Roisin, you referred John to Turn to Me. Why? Why Turn to Me?
As I think I touched on before, it seemed that John was already really comfortable talking in an online setting and kind of writing his feelings down, and he didn't really seem that comfortable talking to someone face to face yet, so I thought Turn to Me is online. And also he seemed to not really be very clear about what he was going through. His comment was a bit jumbled, and he was kind of venting a bit, so kind of to talk to other people who are going through a tough time as well. Which
is the online support group. And Owen, how does your online support group work? Because that is where one of the differentiators between you and, say, Reach Out.
Sure, yeah. The online support groups would be open groups, meaning that people can join them whenever they want. They're not fixed duration groups over, say, 10 weeks or 12 weeks. People can more or less come and go as they please. We think that it's quite important at this point in time that they're professionally facilitated. What that allows for is that rather than on our forums, which are more publicly accessible and they're moderated by volunteers who've received some training, but obviously not the same level as a professional, in the online support groups we can more directly tackle and really deal with some of the issues people might be facing that wouldn't be appropriate on the forums. So for instance, one of our groups would have a suicidal thoughts and feelings theme to it. And when people go there, they can actually explore in a little bit more depth, but also safely, some of those more distressing thoughts and emotions they might be experiencing. A lot of the time, and I have no problem saying this as a mental health professional, I'm more than happy to move into the background really and become irrelevant as people are providing a lot of support to one another. And one of the ideas that you seemed quite taken by last night when we were talking about this a little bit was this concept of the helper therapy principle, which was put forward by Reisman way back in 1965, and he suggested that for people who are perhaps disempowered or alienated as a result of mental health issues, when they directly experiencing themselves not only receiving support but providing it to other people as well, that can be very, very therapeutic. Over a number of weeks when John would have been engaged in the OSGs, not only was he having his own experiences normalized and accepted and responded to in a very safe way, but he was also helping others as well, and that may have made him feel a little bit less powerless and as though he was part of the solution for other people as well as himself. The key thing there with safety is that if one group member actually makes a suggestion, and one thing that might crop up from time to time is somebody who might have a very, say, negative attitude towards the use of medication and things like that. If they come in and give what is, quite frankly, bad information, which would be to come off their meds immediately because people don't need that, that's where the professional facilitator can come in and suggest that no, actually that needs to be run by a psychiatrist or a GP or the mental health professional with whom they're working on in the offline setting as well. So that's an attempt to keep that safe. And after a few weeks, John determined that he didn't need to move on to our more intensive one-to-one services. He just needed to work a little bit on problem solving and figure out what his next steps were from there.
And John, you got benefits from that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like Owen mentioned, I used the work groups. They were very beneficial. And then I just wanted to kind of work through some problem-solving steps for myself as well. So I did end up kind of going online again and kind of using websites like Counselling Directory and stuff like that to actually find a counsellor that I could go to see, and I could see kind of on a one-to-one basis as well.
So Kerry, does this all sound very familiar? Very similar stories in Australia?
Yeah, it absolutely does. So we've been running our online service for 15 years, and we've had our community forums up and running since 2006, so the last 7 years. And over that time, we have had a lot of feedback from young people who believe that they would not be still with us today if they didn't manage to access those services at that point of time in crisis for them. I think it's really important that we also recognise the role that Reach Out and other services play in terms of early intervention and connecting young people with each other and with information which help them really understand what's going on for them, so that we're intervening at a time before young people reach that point of crisis as well. So it's a really important role that these services are playing at that point in time. A lot of the young people that benefit from the service that we run in Australia come on board down the track to join our youth moderator program, and it's their way of kind of giving back to the community, and we train them up effectively, and then they become what is another set of eyes and ears, and they model good community behaviour so that we have a really positive, proactive community, and make sure that they're escalating and reporting through to the professional moderators as appropriate and as we spoke about earlier. So while we have really positive experience here, we're always looking out for some ways that we can improve the service. We spoke before about, at the moment, we're not resourced appropriately to manage to moderate 24/7. One of the things that we're delighted to be over here with is that so we can talk to our colleagues, our sister organisations in Dublin. We also have Inspire USA, our sister organisation there, so that we can start to look at some concepts like follow the sun moderation, so that we can start to see if we can find a way of moderating these communities 24/7. There's a lot of thinking that needs to be done. There's obviously a lot of different legislation in each of the countries, but it really provides an opportunity in this online space for us to enhance our services even further and be able to be even more responsive to the young people that we're there to support.
And I know, Owen, that Reach Out, one of its messages, the key messages that it wants to get across is about choice. It's not just about Reach Out. So obviously, since you're a separate but sister organisation, if you like, you would be very keen on making sure that people understand that there are many choices.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I mean, last night we were talking a little bit about the sheer number of people who are engaging online. So it really is important, and the term came up last night, this notion of stepped care model. There are a lot of people who want to engage online, but they just want information, or they just want to talk to other members. So creating that kind of, somebody mentioned a pyramid, where the largest possible number of people can just engage with other members and get that really informal support, and then move upwards towards increasingly professionalised levels of service for more intense distress, for more personalised response, and that really kind of optimises what the internet has to offer.
Okay, final question to you, Owen, is something which has been raised is, does online just bring you to offline to Lana and to her colleagues?
Well, no, I mean, very often what we could make sense of in terms of online and what it represents, it can be a precursor to seeking offline help and engaging with a professional service. And that even on its own is very important, because a lot of people, when they enter into that virtual space, they start hearing that other people's experiences are similar. They start thinking that having a mental health issue doesn't make them crazy or mad or anything of the sort, and that it's actually very common. Generally, we find that by being destigmatized in that way, they're a lot more likely then to move on to appropriate services that might not best be dealt with purely online. So it can function as a precursor. It can also function as an additional support, where they might be meeting with a psychiatrist or a psychotherapist offline, but then out of hours, which is a problem sometimes with services, there's nowhere to go, they can go online when they need that bit of additional support. And then there's a final group of people for whom it's a standalone alternative. They may actually have a preference for engaging online, and they may not actually need to engage offline. So it can be all three things rather than having to be one.
John, last word to you. Good outcome. What's the big message? What's your key message?
I suppose I have been affected by things that have happened in my life, but I think overall, after reaching out for help and support through a variety of different avenues, I suppose I have more self-awareness and a bit more aware of what to do if I am going through a tough time, and that there is help out there whenever I do kind of go through a tough period in my life.
Mum, Debbie, final observations?
Little steps, little apples. We're working through everything. I'm very proud of him. He's doing so well. And he seems to be in a much better place, and therefore so am I.
And on that note, I think we say well done.
Thank you.